Respected Vice Chancellor, Terry School of Advanced Studies, Professor Prateek Sharma, Country Manager, the Climate Reality Project India, Mr. Aditya Pundir, esteemed panelists, Mr. Sanjay Marwa, Member Central Groundwater Board, Professor Joyita Gupta, Professor, University of Amsterdam, Dr. Ranjana Ray Chaudhary, Assistant Professor, Terry School of Advanced Studies, and all the participants who have joined us today. Good evening and greetings on the World Water Day 2022 on the theme Groundwater Making the Invisible Visible. On behalf of the Climate Reality Project India and the Terry School of Advanced Studies, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking out time to join us in the webinar on India's depleting groundwater from policy to action. 50% of the global drinking water requirement is met by groundwater. India is hugely dependent on groundwater for its irrigation and drinking water requirement. 85% of our rural drinking water requirement comes from groundwater, and 60% of our irrigated agriculture is dependent on groundwater. The number of bore wells in India has gone up from 1 million to 20 million in the last 50 years, and the Central Groundwater Board has categorized almost about 35% of the groundwater blocks as semi-critical, critical, or overexploited. Given that the global population is going to touch about 9 billion by 2050, groundwater will continue to be a critical source of water to sustain both lives and livelihoods on Earth. On that note, I would like to invite Professor Prateek Sharma, the Vice Chancellor of Terry School of Advanced Studies, to deliver the welcome address. I would also like to acknowledge that Professor Prateek Sharma has been instrumental in setting up two interdisciplinary programs on water in the Terry School of Advanced Studies in 2014, along with the Department of Regional Water Studies. He has more than 20 years of experience in academic and research activities. Over to you, Professor Prateek, for the welcome address.
Thank you, Fawzia. Thank you so much. Mr. Aditya Pundir, Dr. Marwa, Professor Gupta, and all Dr. Bhavesh and all colleagues from the Terry School of Advanced Studies. It's such a pleasure to actually be part of this discussion that we are having today on the World Water Day. And it's very important and pertinent that, we should be discussing, something which is actually is so critical for our existence, and what Fawzia mentioned, making the invisible visible, this is something philosophically speaking also, and practically speaking also, is quite relevant for the groundwater, because in the context of surface water, we can actually see the lakes actually depleting, the water levels rising. All those things are quite perceptible, quite perceptible. But the moment we see the groundwater, there's something which is invisible because of the very character of the groundwater. The changes that basically take place, we are conditioned actually that the groundwater source especially is an infinite source, and we keep on extracting without actually getting to know exactly, if I were to so how much we are extracting and what impact it is going to make actually to the levels, because it is not actually it's not visible, so to say. And so it becomes very critical in that context. And if you see in the Indian context, as Dr. Fawzia also mentioned in her initial remark, India is highly dependent on the groundwater. And if you see in the Indian context, more than 50% of India suffers from water stress. And we actually also observe the studies reveal that we have very low water storage, especially in the context of reservoirs and groundwater. And the World Bank report basically indicates that India uses more than 230 cubic kilometers of groundwater per year, and which actually makes India, India as world's largest user of groundwater. and which is something really significant. And given the population and the land area that we have, it becomes very critical to know actually, that India happens to be the largest user of the groundwater. And if you see, out of this, the water extracted, 90% of the groundwater that we extract in India is basically used for agricultural purposes. And if you see the figures indicate that 60% of the irrigated land in India is supported primarily by the groundwater supplies. And so therefore, and then, especially, in states like Haryana and Punjab, which actually witnessed the impacts of Green Revolution. There was a lot of groundwater extraction, and which initially was not so well documented, but later figures are indicating that how much groundwater water actually has been extracted. And this is my favorite quote that I'll always mention this, what gets measured gets managed. And when you start measuring, you actually, then you start realizing what actually is, what is happening, and you actually get to know the gravity of the problem that one is actually witnessing. And through quantification only, one actually gets to know, one then starts actually thinking of what kind of solutions one should be actually targeting at. Another, figure actually that basically worries us is basically that, if you see the rate of extraction and rate of recharge over the years, basically, the percentage ratio has increased at a very disturbing rate, and which makes it very important that something needs to be done, especially in the context of groundwater, because as I mentioned initially, it's not a infinite resource, even though which seems to be invisible, but actually it is quite finite. And so therefore we need to develop appropriate policies which have a scientific basis, so that the allocation of water should have a basis, and it should not be made available just just like that. And people do not take especially such an important resource for granted, and there has to be some policy interventions which should be implemented also on the ground. So in that context, the topic on World Water Day, especially related to groundwater, is very relevant. And I take, I again compliment Dr. Fauziya for, with all seriousness, for, taking up this topic and, making this topic as a discussion with so much eminent, scholars amidst us. And with these words, actually, I would thank all of you for, being part of such an important discussion, and all the very best.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Prateek. I think you rightly pointed out, India uses almost a quarter of the global total groundwater. So we are definitely one of the largest users of groundwater. The other thing that you spoke about, the extraction, the ratio of extraction to recharge, it almost as high as it is like 300% in Gurgaon. There was once a time, it was almost 300%. For Punjab, it is like 170%. So definitely the rate of withdrawal or the rate of extraction is very high, and perhaps the highest in the breadbasket of India. That is the Northwest region that we are talking about. Policies, yes, we still need to have robust policies to govern that. Thank you very much, Professor Prateek, for laying the context, at the same time delivering the welcome address. So we now are honored to have amongst us Mr. Aditya Pundir, who is the country manager for the Climate Reality Project India. He took over the branch in 2010 and is posted in New Delhi. He received his training from the Honorable Vice President of the US, Al Gore, in 2009. on climate change and was selected for Australian Leadership Awards training in 2013. He has worked extensively in the field of climate change and sustainability in India. He is indeed a visionary who has been instrumental in growing Climate Reality Project India from strength to strength. I always feel very, very honored to be part of his team, the Climate Reality Project India, and working as the honorary national coordinator for water. Had the honor of visiting the project of Climate Reality India in Pune. And I would now like to invite Mr. Aditya Pundir to share some grassroots initiative in groundwater recharge by the Climate Reality Project India. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Fauzia. Indeed, Professor Prateek has already set the stage very rightly with his comments and his information. He's talked about all seriousness of how the groundwater situation is today. And as you know, Climate Reality Project is an international organization which works on climate change. As you can say, this is one of our major domains. But we are also trying to work a lot on the adaptation strategies and because of the impacts and the vulnerabilities which the climate change has. So water is something very dear to us, and especially the area I look after, like I look after the India and South Asia. The situation is quite bad nearly all the places. So I've just put up a small presentation. I'll just share it with you about what the situation is and how we try to take it forward. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Aditya.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I'll proceed then. Well, I think I'll start with so that because I know in such type of audiences, we have people from different backgrounds. So I'll just take first 2-3 minutes to warm up the audience about that, why we are talking so fervently about the groundwater. So as we know that IPCC, the world's largest scientific body, which is working on climate change and the impact the humans are having, the Anthropocene era we are going through. So the warnings they have given, the report which came out in August 2021 is now very clear that what is happening today to most of the ecosystems is because of the human influence. And probably, I think India is no stranger to now these things, like one of the most quiet seas, Arabian Sea, which never has a storm. We had a Taukte coming last year, 2021, which probably had just moved. Fortunately, it did not hit Mumbai. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster on its own scale. And of course, we have these. On one end, we are having these massive cyclones coming. We already have one going on yesterday, which we came to the East Coast, the Andamans, we had it. So on one side, we are having this evaporation happening from the oceans, which is giving us these downpours. And the other end, we are also having a lot of evaporation happening from the land. And this evaporation is the one which is causing a lot of issues now to the farmers globally. We are having massive droughts. And I visited a couple of places all over India. I've seen these areas. Literally, people have had no rain for many places for 5 to 7 years. So that is the situation we are now looking at. So in these circumstances, as Professor Prateek said, that I'll just put it again back in context, that the global water usage, if you see, about 70% is going towards agriculture. And then with the rise of temperature, as we are talking about 1 degree rise in temperature is coming, it's becoming hotter, water is getting scarcer, whether it's people, crops, energy, industry, animals, everywhere the water usage is rising. And this is as groundwater is one of the major places from where we are extracting water. So the aquifers are losing water globally. Like if you see this the slide of mine, you'll see that India is one of those places where it is one of the most intense. The loss is one of the most intense in the parts of India, parts of United States, China. So these are the countries which are extremely badly impacted. And more than 40% of the world population, that's what the estimate is, would be impacted by this scarcity of water. And the estimates are that by 2050, 6% of the GDP of the country would be lost. If you see in this red area, right from Japan onwards till Africa and India and Middle East, these all countries are very, very badly affected will be affected by water, by the scarcity of water. Now coming to the part like, so as I told you, the Climate Reality Project works. We work a lot on education. We work on water. We are working on planting of trees as a part of adaptation in India. So this is one of the projects we took up because what we are feeling is that though the government is very serious about it, government wants things to happen, people also want, but there's a gap. There's a gap between people who are doing it and the people who are talking about it. There's a lot of knowledge available, but then how do you convert it into a solution? So this is my story going to be. Well, this is a place called in Pune district, Ambegaon Taluka. It's about, you can say, 60 kilometers from Pune. So this case study I'm going to discuss with you is about these villages. These are 4 villages: Bhavadi, Karegaon, Thugaon, and Kurvandi. So these villages were picked up. These villages are on the foothills of, you can say, Western Ghats. It's a plateau region. It's at a decent altitude. And the rainfall is medium rainfall. They get about 800 mm plus minus 20, you can say. And there are very few water sources they have. And the government, because of the amount of less of water they're getting, drinking water, so every month they have to be given every day 3 tankers have to come with water. Otherwise, there's no water. So they're running a bill of about 3 lakh rupees monthly as far as the village goes for just drinking water. So we were very interested in this. We came across this project, this requirement, and we started talking to them way back in 2020. That's the time when the COVID struck, actually. So we had just started talking to them. And here you see in the picture our national coordinator of rainwater harvesting and water, Colonel Dalvi, who's from the forces, retired from the forces. He's leading us this charge as far as the water and rainwater harvesting is done. He's done a number of projects. So he got seriously involved and he started talking to the people like, how can we move ahead? So a couple of meetings were held. So he started meeting people, village meetings were held. Then local leaders were contacted. Similarly, the government officers who are of that particular area, we got in touch with them also. So he started having meetings with the local politicians, local government officers, as well as the village people. So the whole objective of this exercise was that we wanted the community to have a buy in the project, and they should take it as partners and not only as beneficiaries. Because whenever you take a project as only simply as a beneficiary, then the thing is you just take it as a gift. But when you take it as a partner, then there's an involvement, and there's an involvement. You want to do something, you have ownership. So this is something we wanted to build in right from the day one, because we had studied a lot of projects which had failed. So we started working with the villagers, and in about a year's time, I would say, because of the COVID, there were a lot of challenges in organizing meetings and all. But fortunately, on 23rd May, we had a couple of meetings and they agreed. And ICICI Bank at the other end was also looking for a project. They said, we are ready to fund this project for 4 villages. So now the money was in place. We had the people who are willing to do it. So then the project took off. On 23rd May, we had a meeting. We called all the people from all the village. The elders were there. The Gram Pradhans were there from 4 villages. They came together and a plan was made. So on 5th June, we thought that's the best day to start such an auspicious project. So on 5th June, World Environment Day in this 2021, the project was started in the village Bhavadi. So we got the teams came, the people who were the maps industries who were doing this project for us. They had their crews which were ready, who were well-trained plumbers. They knew how to fix all the roofing job. They knew how to do the plumbing job. So the crew came and they settled down in the villages, because the objective was that if you stay outside the villages, a lot of time would be lost in commuting, going and coming. So it was seen that the villages were comfortable, the crews were comfortable inside the villages. And already about in the last 2 months, when we were planning and talking to villagers, detailed plans had been made, like how is to be done, which houses have to be covered, and which points are to be charged. So everything was there. The blueprint was given to the team to start the work. So with the work was started, of course, taking all the cultural parameters into account so that it becomes a success. So now some of the challenges which we faced while doing the project was, one was project delay due to compliance and regulatory procedures. One was, of course, this. Then there were, because of the COVID running, that is 2021, as you know, the second wave was very devastating. So because of this, the markets were opening, closing, and the costing was going haywire for the project, because there was sometimes materials were not available in the market. Then we were also scared that the monsoon would be coming very soon, and all the civil work had to be done before the monsoon comes. Otherwise, First of all, there will be no benefit of catching the rain. And secondly, it will be very difficult to work also during the rain time. And of course, the COVID was going on and on. As you know, Maharashtra is the most impacted place. So this was a continuous challenge we were facing. So we had to work with COVID in the background and all the challenges which you see. So detail, as I told you, a detailed survey of each village was done. So work team was stationed in the villages. So we were continuously reviewing. A weekly review at every Thursday was done by Colonel Dalvi himself. He used to go. He would check all the work which has been done every week. So this is how, on a weekly basis, it was done. Literally, like with military precision, he did this work, and we are thankful. Like the crew also stood up. They worked literally sometimes from morning to late evenings. They were working because everybody was trying to do it before the rains come. So that was the basic thing. And the selection of structures also I like to talk to you about. Like here you see there's a Gram Panchayat office, there's a mandir. So we generally try to pick up those social buildings. Like you have a school is top priority. Then if there is a local mandir, there's a local masjid, there's a crematorium, there is a like public buildings or Gram Panchayat buildings. These buildings are taken because the water which is being collected from them is for everyone, and it's more of a social good. So we prefer these buildings to begin with, and of course, then private houses are also included, and of course, throughout as this project was going on, we saw to it that all the people, especially the sarpanch of the village. Here you see the lady sarpanch who was taking a lot of interest in the project. So she was going around literally every day looking at what is the development happening. So we kept everybody involved, and as the project. And here in this picture, you can see the type of roofs we were dealing with. These are not those beautiful flat roofs like which people talk about theoretically, that this is how these are you can see these are khaprel as they call it in local language. These slated roofs were there which were collecting water. So we fixed gutters. You can see the gutters have been fixed. So gutters were there, and the pipes, and these pipes would then take the water and charge the hand water pumps or the wells which were nearby. Now you can make the connection. There's the structure at the behind which has got all the infrastructure like gutters etc. put in, and the pipes, and it is charging this bore well which is about, say, I would say about 25 meters away with the fresh water, and this water would be taking care of literally 100 families, this particular bore well. So this is how the project went, and by 30th September we were able to complete this project in all the 4 villages despite all the odds. And here you see about 162 installations were done. That is the number of wells, or you can say pumps, which were charged. And the rooftop area is about 98,000 square feet, and water potential is about 7.8 million. So that is the power actually of rainwater. And this is good quality water which is going in. So this is the kind of water now which they'll be having. So they were able to take half the rain's benefit, and we are very hopeful by this year they will be able to take it forward. Now, another very important thing which comes with this type of projects is that why I was talking continuously about making them partners and not beneficiary is that, these structures require maintenance also. The rainwater harvesting structures have to be cleaned, because otherwise they will have dirty water coming, and you will have leaves, and you will have all types of, because they're all exposed to the elements. So these people have to maintain, they have to look after the structures, they have to clean it. So a lot of training was going on simultaneously of the villages. So continuously training was being done so that these people understand it and they are able to maintain it. Then on 12th of February this year, because the COVID was more or less gone, most of the third wave had receded considerably and the places were open. So we organized a function where a lot of people got together. The idea was not to just celebrate that these 4 villages. The idea was we wanted as many people from villages, especially the headmen, the sarpanch, and the local politicians to come and have a look. The whole idea was to tell them that this is possible, and if these 4 small villages can do it, of course, the bigger villages and with the more resources, it can be done all over the place. So it was a big success. We had a lot of visitors coming. They saw it. And a local press also took a lot of interest, and they came and they covered the project, and in Marathi language, a lot of publications, they talked about it. So overall, I would say it was a successful project, and we were able to, you can say, we were able to complete it in time. And so our demonstrative project has now been shown to people that this is how it can be done. And now the ICICI is extremely happy, and so are the local administration. And now they're talking about 100 villages which they want to get done and surveyed. So that's going to be a very big task, I know. But the whole idea is India is a very big country. It's a very big country, and the water scarcity is intense. Like my experience of moving all over this region is that the water is something which can take us down if in the future. So I think the Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat and this Bhujal Yojana, which they're talking about, everybody's talking about, would be one of the very, I would say, play a very critical role in coming times, that how we meet this crisis coming in 2030, 35, when climate impacts are really going to kick in. Because as you're seeing just at present, the climate impacts have just started kicking in, but another 10, 15 years down, they might be quite intense. So with that, I pass it back to Fazia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Aditya. It's so inspiring, you know. It's a living example, and I would really suggest anybody visiting Pune should take out time and visit this. You know, I had a chance to visit these projects very, you know, on a very, I would say, nominal budget, leveraging on the existing infrastructure that is there, as Aditya showed, the recharging through the hand pump that is already available, covering a large number of houses and government infrastructure, the common buildings which are there, functional, training people, bringing people on board. Most of the projects, you know, they treat people as just the beneficiaries and not really the partners in project. And hence, we see most of the CSR projects, for instance, falling flat immediately after the project period. And so they become more like a photo shoot option rather than a real living example. And this is one. And I would really like to compliment even Colonel Dalvi. So Colonel Dalvi is more than 75 years, I think, Aditya, right? Is 75 plus.
Yeah.
And the zeal with which he works, huh? And you know, even the stride that he takes when you walk with him in the village, probably everything about him is very, very motivating. So it is definitely, I would say. In fact, he was also sort of invited on Kaun Banega Crorepati. So amazing work that he is doing, and amazing work, of course, the Climate Reality Project India is doing. Thank you so much, Aditya, for presenting this. And with that, we will move on to the panel discussion. And we have the three esteemed panelists who are there with us today. So we will begin with understanding the problem of groundwater in India. And for that, I would like to invite Mr. Sanjay Marwa, who is the member with the Haryana Water Resources Authority, Panchkula. He has more than 35 years of work experience, and he has retired as the member Central Groundwater Board, Ministry of Jal Shakti. His present assignment focuses on conservation, management, and regulation of water in the state of Haryana. He has also been part of the team that compiled manuals on groundwater recharge techniques, Perspective Plan of Groundwater Resources of India, Master Plan for Artificial Recharge in India, Punjab Water Quality Issues and Challenges. He has co-authored books and also has almost 40 publications to his credit. He has been part of the ambitious project on mapping of aquifers in India, nodal officer in Central Groundwater Board for implementation of Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, Har Khet Ko Pani, for supporting states for bringing additional areas under assured irrigation, utilizing groundwater. Sir, thank you very much for taking out time to join us today for this webinar. And I would like you to reflect on the present state of groundwater in India and what are the policies which are there in place, and what are the challenges in implementation of these policies. And especially since we have launched the Atal Bhujal Yojana, focusing on recharging of our groundwater in December 2019, how can this be leveraged by common people for grassroots action? So over to you, Mr. Marwa.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Fazia. It's really heartening to note about the concern regarding the groundwater, which is being envisaged because of the SEER's make groundwater. This is theme making groundwater visible. Actually, visibility is definitely an issue. I had been. I'm a hydrogeologist, a groundwater scientist. Who since last 30-35 years is actually trying to make people understand that never look at groundwater like a tub of water, which has water and inserted inside the earth. It is not like that. Had it been like that, then everywhere we would have a saline water, not the fresh water. So that means groundwater has a very peculiar quality aspects. It is under natural flow conditions. There are aquifers which we need to understand, which control the movement of the groundwater. And the way they control the movement of groundwater, the availability and the quality automatically come into the being. Everybody is talking here about Haryana, Punjab, and Western UP or parts of the this belt. Let me tell you, these areas are purely alluvial aquifers, and where these aquifers are multi-layered. That means there are number of layers of the aquifers in these areas which are getting exploited at various depths, depending upon the power or the financial power which exists with the local population. We all know that the groundwater, India was not that having food security. The groundwater saw to it that it has the food security because of the, I mean, rightly said by Professor Aditya, that it's the Green Revolution which ultimately catapulted the India into the actually a food secure nation rather than a food dependent nation. Just think of the current global geopolitical scenario where some of the countries are having the price rises in the wheat. Does India has a rise in the wheat prices? It doesn't have, because we grow our own wheat and now we are exporting our wheat also. And that is being sustained by assured irrigation through either groundwater, and now some of the places like Madhya Pradesh, the surface water has also come into the being. The groundwater has a typical nature characteristic that it works as the easiest form of resource in the hand of a farmer or a user or any stakeholder, where with the comfort of a button, he can draw water. And that actually is definitely it ultimately gives so many problems with that. The ease of living also gives it this there, because we are not aware of that how much water we are going to get by pushing of a button. As far as the India is concerned, we have just 2.4% of the world land area, 4%, and we sustain around 18% of the world population with that. And this whole thing, mass, we actually have just 4% of the world's water resources. And definitely, it's very rightly said that we draw practically more than 1/4 of the global groundwater resources, and which if you put Russia, you put US and China put together, we draw more water than that. So that's definitely going to be a big issue. It is a big issue. We need to work at it. If you see the total water availability in India, it's around 4,000 BCM of rainfall, which is falling on this surface of whatsoever landmass we have. We have just around 2,000 total water which is available. Out of that, around 1,122 BCM water is available, and around 432 BCM water is in the groundwater, remaining around 690 BCM is with the surface water. So and that too, this is a total quantity of water, but this quantity is not equitably, equally distributed across whole of the landmass of the earth, especially in the Indian subcontinent. The India has a very peculiar climate also. Only some parts of Northwest India, they have the, good aquifers, which I was just talking about. But look at the nature in those areas. The total rainy days or the monsoon days are around 90. The rainy days are just around 30. The rainfall days in those rainy days, which actually lead to any significant outflow is hardly, say, probably 3 to 4 days only. So that means if you put number of hours, and then coupled with the new problem of the climate change. The climate change is actually resulting into the extreme events occurring regularly, extreme good high rainfall occurring in a very shorter span of time. Earlier days, we used to in local language, we used to call jhadi, I mean the swath of rainfall. Say that it used to start on one Saturday, it will end on next Saturday. So it doesn't happen anymore now these days. There is the rain showers are there. They hardly occur for say 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and then the water logging is everywhere, and that water is available. This is the only water which is available, which is falling in a total number of hours, around 40 to 60 hours in a year, which we need to manage in 365 days. And we have to utilize that for the drinking water, for industry. We need for our agriculture growth. As you rightly said, the more than 80% of the land, they require this particular water. So from where this water will go? The groundwater also is a type of water which was let into the surface. It is nothing, it is let into the surface by the earlier generations who didn't use it. So this is the storage which was left by our forefathers, which is now available. And we are just extracting, just switching on the buttons and just extracting it. So ultimately what happens, these are if you see the statistics, then the country statistics, if you see, we have around 7,000 groundwater blocks, which we are monitoring at the Central Groundwater Board. And out of that, around 35%, around 2,441 blocks are overexploited, critical or semi-critical. I mean, these are the stressed areas. And you see around 35%, but that doesn't mean that the Maharashtra or the western parts or Western Ghats are having more rainfall and they have the water also. That doesn't mean like that. Look at the case of Haryana, I mean, the state to which I am working with these days. Out of 141 blocks, around 111 blocks, that means as high as 79% of the blocks are stressed, because as per the water balance situations. Now, if you see the water levels in these areas, now the categorization of the water levels has been undertaken by the Haryana Water Resource Authority. We have little bit, I'll tell you what we are making the groundwater as more simplified actually. Simplified means if we talk about so many equations, so many big things, it's hard to comprehend what is overexploited, what is critical, when the critical will become semi-critical, when the critical will become overexploited, how much time frame it will take. So these questions automatically come into being. Everybody knows, okay, critical means important. We need to take so many measures for that. Then what we now thought of that, let's make the things very simplified. We study the topmost aquifer, which is the unconfined aquifer, which is the water table aquifer, which is recharged by the rainfall every year. Let's talk about that first. First thing first. And let's not talk about the deeper aquifers. And we will talk about them. And I'm not saying that we leave them behind, but we'll talk about them also, because these are the aquifers. Why we will talk about the topmost aquifers? Because these are the aquifers which are used by the everyone, by the domestic user, by putting small pumps, and most of the agriculture is being used. Farmers are using these aquifers. Now, what is the scenario in Haryana? When we started studying in a different way, we started only with the help of the water levels. That's all. And see how the water levels are behaving since last 10 years. And what is their conditions now as of now. Recently, we went ahead with the public notices to all people that they can come up with their suggestions on these categorizations. So we divided, instead of 4 categories, we divided the state into the 7 categories. What are those 7 categories? Water levels more than 30 meters, 20 to 30 meters, 10 to 20 meters, 5 to 10 meters, 2 to 5 meters, 3 to 5 meters, 1.5 to 3 meters, and 0 to 1.5 meters. So you see that there is a complete range of the water levels from 0 to 3, first category. That means if the groundwater levels are between 0 to 3, then these are the waterlogged areas. So we need to have different type of management interventions to tackle these areas because there is a problem of the waterlogging. It does not mean, so everybody thinks that the problem is of the water depletion. No, please don't take it like that. There are big areas of water depletion, but within the big areas of water depletion, there are certain pockets, certain villages, say maybe whole of Haryana, they may be around 7%, but the 7% total villages are around more than 400 villages. So we need to handle those villages also. So we need to not put more water into those areas, rather extract more water from those areas so that let the natural rainfall goes in and improves the groundwater quality, improves the soil salinity, and then slowly and steadily the land can be made areable, which was not areable because of the waterlogged area. The waterlogging results into the water salinity, it results into the soil salinity, and then ultimately there you cannot grow any crops. So we thought of that this type of study we will do. Then we concentrated on those areas which are more than 30 meters. And that how the 30 meter is because of the groundwater exploitations. So these are the government policies which we need to address to. So all these areas, like Fazia just told that Atal Bhujal Yojana is there. Remember, Fazia, that Atal Bhujal is not for the recharging. I'm sorry to make everybody understand here that we are not, it is not for the recharging. Recharging does not solve the purpose. Please think of that what is recharging? Okay, I'll tell you. You have an area where there was the earlier speaker has said that there was an area in Maharashtra where the average rainfall was more than 800 mm. So this area I'm talking about is having just a half of the rainfall, is around 400, 300 mm is the rainfall. In the 300 mm rainfall, we are growing crops which need water as high as 2000 in a year. So from where the water will come? The water has to be transported from outside, either from the groundwater, from somewhere. If we do not transport, what we'll do? We'll withdraw from the groundwater and we will eat away utilize the resources which was left by our forefathers. And because they didn't have the technology to draw the water, our generation will be definitely blamed for that and be sure for that we'll be having, we need to think of that. You know, I remember one quote from Bhagavad Gita also, where Lord, Krishna has said that when we are born on this earth, we don't bring anything with us when we are born. So we utilize the resources which are available here. What are these resources? Air, land, and then water. Our body is 2/3 of water, more than 2/3 of water is our body. And if we use this water and we waste this water, it becomes a sin for us. We have to repay to the nature. We take this resources from the nature. We need to repay in this Janma only. That goes with the Indian theory of the karma also. So, it's nothing like that. It's basically, if we are using a resource, we must use the resource very carefully, conserve it, try to repay that what we are using it. It's not by the payment basis that we need the cryptocurrencies or all those that we can repay them. No, I'm sorry, I will not be able to do it. So all these things practically put together they laid stress on the system, and then the system has to take care of its own. All of us have to take measures. Why all of us? Is because it's a common pool resource. I am drawing the water. That does not mean I am drawing the water from my own house. I'm drawing the water, groundwater, from the whole of the area from where the drawdown in that particular well or water which is flowing from the well is coming here. Now, most of you people are probably in Delhi area. Does the Delhi has a recharge? It has a very less recharge. Vertical recharges are very, very less. The water which is there used to flow from the Himalayas. And you will be wondering how the Himalayas are leading. There are underground aquifers, which there are 2-3 layers of aquifers. You know, some of the years ago, these aquifers under so much pressure that near Kundli, north of the Kundli border, north of the Delhi, the groundwater was oozing on its own. So now because of the reduction of the pressure, the groundwater, there is no now artesian conditions. That means the water level was not coming on the surface. Now, because of the utilization of the water, reduction of the recharge, more stress on the groundwater, the volume of the water automatically coming on the ground, the pressure is getting reduced. And these are the issues which we need to look at this. Now,
Mr. Marwa, we'll have to stop here.
Surely.
So we'll come back again. Yeah.
Can I talk about a little bit on Atal Jal, ma'am, in case you allow just 2 minutes?
Sure, please. Just about 2 minutes.
Yeah. So because Atal Jal has taken a lot of consideration. It's a government of because there is a certain misconceptions about Atal Jal. Atal Jal. We conducted a study in Central Groundwater Board where we found that the recharge, if you take whole of the water, it just amounts to only 6% in the reduction in the groundwater stage of development, which you quoted around 300% for the Gurgaon. And in case of Kurukshetra, this study was done. But if you put all these are the supply side measures. Now, if you take the demand side measures, put all these measures at one place, the groundwater withdrawals are going to reduce it. What are those measures which can possibly can be undertaken? And they are looking now. They will be looking at that. First thing is the crop diversification. There's a government scheme like Mera Pani Meri Virasat. Then there is a reuse of the treated wastewater, putting that water for the agriculture crops. Then micro irrigation, crop in those areas where crop diversification or even the waterlogged areas it is to be taken. Then using the saline areas for the fisheries development. Then there is an integrated planning which is coming into the force. Now, what is this integrated planning? The planning till now, what was the focus was? Focus was a project. Conceive a project, think of how much water it will save, and then execute it. We have made the things, we have reversed the things now. What is the reversal is? First, you think of the water gap, total gap between the annual availability and the withdrawal. Try to reduce this gap by a percentage of 10% in the first year, 20% in the second year, 30% in this on a cumulative basis. And then make the schemes accordingly, looking at all these aspects of rainfall availability, then the crops diversification, the paddy, all these things put together, and then make a comprehensive and holistic scheme to undertake. So I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marwa. I know there's so much to speak, and as you rightly said, Atal Bhujal Yojana is not about really recharge, but it's about better water management, better water governance. Very, very right. It's not pan-India. It is right now, we're in the first phase, it's only in 7 states across India and around 8,300 gram panchayats that it is happening. A little bit on Atal Bhujal Yojana, I have put in the chat box for the benefit of all the participants to also see just a few points wherein, what Atal Bhujal Yojana entails, and very rightly pointed out by you. And on that, since Atal Bhujal Yojana is all about governance, so I always say that let's not continue to keep adding water. We need to add good governance. And today we are really, really honored to have Professor Joyita Gupta with us from University of Amsterdam. Professor Joyita Gupta was co-chair of UNEP's Global Environment Outlook, published by Cambridge University Press, which is presented to governments participating in the United Nations Environment Assembly in 2019, and won the Association of American Publishers Prose Award for Environmental Science. She's presently co-chair of the Earth Commission 1921, set up by the Future Earth together with the Johan Rockstrom and Daekin. She is full professor of environment and development in the Global South at the Amsterdam Institute for Social Science Research of University of Amsterdam and IHE Delft Institute for Water Education. She's also faculty professor on sustainability. She leads the program group on governance and inclusive development. She was lead author in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which won the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize with Al Gore, and of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which won the Zaved second prize. She has published several books and articles. Her Google Scholar impact factor is 51 with 120 journal papers and more than 10,000 citations at national level. She was the Vice President of the Commission on Development Cooperation 2011-2019 and member of the Advisory Council on International Affairs, a statutory body that advises 3 cabinet ministers in the Netherlands. She has just won the ERC Advanced Grant of 2.5 million euros for work on climate change and fossil fuels. We are extremely, extremely honored to have you with us, Professor Joyita. Heartiest congratulations on getting this award. We look forward to really collaborating with you and working on aspects of climate change in India. But today, I know that you have been extensively carrying out study on challenge of customary law, permits, contracts in 80 countries. And of course, you have actually looked into the overall water governance, but groundwater governance as well. So I would request you to please share some findings of your study and also probably give us a way forward in terms of how better we can work towards governing groundwater in India. Over to you, Professor Joyita.
Thank you so much. It was a long introduction. I'll go straight into the topic. So I decided to pick a few elements for discussion today, taking a slightly legal perspective and looking at countries in the developing world, but in the context of globalization and the Anthropocene. And the Anthropocene is the era in which humans are massively changing the environment. One of the things I wanted to talk about, which has not been touched on yet, is the issue of who owns the water. Now, if you go to many parts of the world, you will find that they were previously perhaps colonies of the UK or of the European mainland countries. Now, in the UK, if you had a piece of land, you owned the groundwater all the way down to hell and all the way up to heaven. That was the idea. And basically the idea was, and it's quite different in some ways because of course groundwater was invisible to them, but the idea was that they could just pump out as much groundwater as they wanted. And this particular approach of groundwater ownership then moved to the United States, Canada, all of Anglophone Africa, India, Australia. So in fact, what happened was that if you owned a piece of land in these countries, you became the absolute owner of the water that you could pump out from underneath. And this was really quite a challenge. Now, some of these countries in the West have been able to take these rights away from the people without compensating them if they did it more than half a century ago. But now Spain is trying to take these rights away from the landowners, and it's very difficult. They have told the landowners, we will pay you back in water for 50 years, and after 50 years, the state becomes the owner of the water. But the Spanish farmers refuse to accept this. So what is happening is that most farmers have said, we're not going to give up our rights to the water. And so this is the problem that's happening right now in Spain. In South Africa, what is happening is South African government made a new law saying that nobody can take water unless they have a permit. But what has happened is if you already own the land and you had already ownership of the water, then you would go to court and say, sorry, the government cannot expropriate or steal my water resource. And so what has happened is that even though on paper in South Africa, you have to have a permit, the existing legal uses of the people who had water rights before has led these people to go to court, and it's all stuck in the courts. And you're seeing this across the world in many parts of the developing world and the developed world, including the United States, where trying to take water ownership rights in order to be able to manage it quite in the way that Dr. Marwaha has explained has been very challenging. And in India, we have the Indian Easement Act of 1882. And when I studied it in India a long time ago, it said that the groundwater is owned by the people who own the land, and that is still there. And I have the feeling that a lot of the discussions in India are not dealing with this issue of how do we change this Indian Easements Act properly. Anyway, this is the old challenge. Now we have a new challenge in the era of globalization, and I'm going to talk about two elements: permits and contracts. What happens is most countries make a water budget. That water budget then determines how much water there is. Then you allocate water to different users and users through a permit system. Now, we have looked at permits across several developing countries in Asia and Africa, and we find that these permits can be for as long as 40 years, can be easily extended to 80 years. If the government wants to take the permit back, it has to pay compensation to the permit holder, which is very expensive. And so what ultimately happens is, while we need to give permits to ensure that large-scale farms and large-scale industries can flourish, on the other hand, it reduces the ability of the state to govern water because, not least because of climate change, but also because of these permits. In addition, what we are finding is that because of global privatization, public-private collaboration, many companies will make agreements with the state. We also have one like that in the energy fields a long time ago, Enron and Maharashtra Energy, where you have a public-private not public-private partnership, it was a contract which creates problems. But what you have very often is that foreign companies come into a country and they make a contract with a state party, a municipality or somebody else. And these contracts are secret most often because by definition, and what they do is they often involve water. So I'm not talking now about a water contract. A water contract does that anyway, but a contract on buying land or a contract on taking out coal or gas or oil or large-scale agriculture or mining, many of these contracts require the government, so this is the mining ministry, to provide water from the water ministry. And it's written into the contracts. These contracts are sometimes for 50 to 100 years. And the government then in the developing world has taken on the responsibility to provide this water. Sometimes the governments even help with evicting local people, which is really absurd. And sometimes, actually, most of the contracts we looked at, if the government says to a particular soft drink company or a beer company that we need the water for other products, so we want to stop this contract, then the company can sue the government for not giving them the right to continue for the next 60, 70 years, for as long as the contract is there. And this causes policy freezing. And many countries in the world are facing this problem. And what you find is that this does not often come out in the newspapers because the contract is secret. The cases around the contracts don't go to the national courts, they go to international courts, and there also they are secret. So we only see the tip of the iceberg unless you do a greater amount of research. So from my perspective, one of the stories for a groundwater governance is how do we equitably dismantle riparian systems, easement systems, and customary systems to make space for the kind of adaptive governance that Dr. Marwaha is talking about? How do we ensure that the Ministry of Water has control over the water and not all the other ministries who are giving away these rights through public-private partnerships and contracts? How do we have control over agriculture and food systems? In many parts of the world, they're talking about changing the way you eat food. I mean, that could mean stop meat production, become vegetarian. This is becoming a very big issue worldwide because of biodiversity loss, because of land use degradation, etc. So, there's a whole discussion taking place about what do we eat. There's also a discussion taking place about the massive amounts of pollution that accumulate in the groundwater systems and on the surface water systems and how they interlink with each other. And finally, I think if you look at all the environmental issues, loss of biodiversity, climate change, water problems, the eutrophication caused by phosphorus and nutrient use, nitrogen use, and you look at ocean pollution, what we are seeing is that we will have to redesign the idea of GDP. I'm coming back to this because at the start of the presentation, statistic was brought forward that 6% of GDP might be lost in a business as usual scenario in 2050. I'm afraid that much more GDP will be lost. And actually, I'm afraid that GDP is the wrong unit, because GDP does not take into account pollution, it does not take into account the destruction of the environment, and very often the destruction of social fabric. So in some ways, we have to think about a different growth strategy. So we have to think beyond water. So first, groundwater is important, but the demand for groundwater is not simply reduced drops per crop. It has to be also, how do we look at the future of India? Is it going to be more GDP, or is it going to be more well-being, happiness, etc.? Sorry for taking up your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Joyita. I think very brilliantly put that. What is the true cost of water? So it's not just the GDP. It's not most of the things that we see in material terms, a lot of things that probably are also invisible or we don't take into consideration, whether it's the water quality or the pollution that you highlighted, the well-being of the people. Like, for instance, arsenic, fluoride, it's impacting a lot of Indians, which also results in loss of productive hours. So how are those being accounted for when we are looking at actual loss because of water insecurity that is going to be there? Also highlighting the legal pluralism, polycentric governance, and all those aspects which you brought out through your presentation. Of course, the permits and contracts and how do they govern in terms of who owns the water, and how probably this ownership translates into whether it translates into conservation or abuse of water, and how difficult it is to actually, with the rights that you have given to people, how tough it gets, giving the example of Spain, that to take away those rights from people, that's very challenging. So definitely things are tough for us too. There are multiple dimensions when it comes to, whenever you have these privileges that you grant to people, whether it is subsidy on diesel or whether it's subsidy on electricity that we grant to people to draw water, or for that matter, the groundwater right in itself. I think there are a large number of questions that needs to be answered. Thank you so much, Professor Joyita, for your wonderful, very insightful presentation, and very diverse, something that probably, people don't talk about. So thanks a lot. And now we move on to Dr. Ranjana. And Dr. Ranjana is a civil and environmental engineer by training and has a PhD in hydrology from Terry School of Advanced Studies. She has over 27 years of experience in industry and academics. She has worked on infrastructure projects involving feasibility studies, design, evaluation, and tender preparation for water treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants, engineered landfills, stormwater drainage plants, environment management systems, and hill development projects. She teaches hydrology, irrigation water management, integrated watershed and river basin management, groundwater hydrology and management, and urban water and wastewater. Ranjana, my question to you is, now that you have heard that the water problem is not just about technology, I think there is so much more to water that is there. So as a hydrologist and as a person who has been involved in large number of projects related to integrated water resources management and land water community security when it comes to water management, given the diversity that India has in terms of geography, climatology, ecology. We have a huge coastline on one side, which is about 7,500 kilometers. We have the mountain region, which is there where the springs are drying up. And then we have our Ganga basin, where we have the problem of arsenic. And then there are regions which are polluted with fluoride. Uranium is one problem that's also there in groundwater. So the problems are diverse. There's so much of spatial and temporal distribution of rainfall as well. What do you think what are the possible, research requirements that are there, or data? For instance, yesterday only the United Nations released a report on groundwater, making the invisible visible. And one of the things that they highlighted was lack of data on groundwater also. So what are the research requirements and the interventions that you think, possible interventions, of course, not everything can be thought about, that would be required to replenish the groundwater? Over to you, Ranjana.
Thank you so much, Fazia, for that introduction. And I've been listening to all the speakers. They really have very wide experience. So let me start a little bit with why we teach groundwater hydrology, and we are always, facing the challenges to, what to teach them so that they are equipped, because they come from diverse backgrounds, and we run an interdisciplinary course. So, and how to let them know what is it that they should learn, and what should be the research areas that one should focus on. So a few research areas regarding that we have been able to identify, as you rightly put out, is the coastal areas where we have the groundwater intrusion, the intrusion in the groundwater because of the saline coastal waters that come in because of the extensive extraction that happens there. So when we look at Chennai, and we see that those wetlands were areas which would kind of keep a balance of the fresh water on the saline water, which is ingressing from the sea. And when these coastal wetlands are areas where the multi-storied buildings have come up, so those pockets which used to help keep a balance of the fresh water, that is not happening. So we have had a few students research on that, and they are incidentally working in wetlands. So Wetlands Asia, because that is a key area. The connect of the wetlands is the connect between the surface water and fresh water. So that's one area where we believe that we need to do a lot of research. The other is the aquifer systems that you spoke about for the hills, as well as the aquifers which are there in the semi-arid region of Rajasthan, Gujarat. So these are not all similar aquifers. So the aquifer mapping, as you said, is a huge challenge. And where do we find the data? What is the depth at which the aquifer is there? And what is the length? Is it connected to the hills? Is it not connected to the hills? And how do we, and this science policy interface that we keep talking about, how do we communicate what we have learned through science to the policymakers, so that these aspects get covered? That and there is, of course, a myth on, as we go deeper, we'll get better quality water. Is it always true? Or is it, as we go deeper, we get saline water? So in the region of Rajasthan, parts of Haryana that Dr. Marwaha was talking about, these are problems that we have to look at. So there is a problem of quantity as well as of quality. So there might be abundant water, but the quality is poor. The other, I want to draw attention also on the cities and their role in drawing out, extracting groundwater, while we are losing the urban cover, the urban blue-green cover, as we say. So looking at the urban forests, the urban greening guidelines and policies on cities to protect the blue-green infrastructure is something that we definitely need to look at. And this again should be a research focus area, especially when we say, if we look at India, we know that in the semi-arid region, and so just to mention a few cities like Delhi, Jaipur, Chennai, as well as Bangalore, these are located on regions which are water scarce. So how do the cities contribute to replenishing the groundwater? Because here there is not just a water quantity problem, but there is also a water quality problem. So can we look at these also as research areas wherein the youth is equipped to carry out research in these areas? Yeah, so that's what I would like to say, Fawzia. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranjana. And I think in the interest of time, thanks for keeping it very brief. I have also shared the latest report by UN Water, the World Water Development Report, which focuses on groundwater, making the invisible visible in the chat box, and maybe that would also carry a few things. So now we move on to the Q&A section, and anybody who has questions, if you would like to type it in the Q&A or the chat box, or you would like to raise your hand, we can take up the questions. Anybody? Professor Prateek, would you like to comment at this point? I can see you.
Yeah, no, Fawzia, we have a lot of audience.
Yeah, we do.
So I think, it's important that, we take some questions from the audience. Because we have a very, substantial number of participants who have been, writing on the chat box. So let us just actually wait.
So I think in the meantime, I have a question to Mr. Marwa. So you did speak about export of wheat or what the Green Revolution did. Are we discussion on virtual water trade in India? Do we think of does it come as part of a policy discussion that when we are exporting food items, or for that matter anything like even automobiles or steel or anything for that matter, do we speak in terms of virtual water trade in our policies?
It's because, we being the core on the waterfront, on the groundwater front, we are definitely concerned. I share your concern equally very well. But if you see in the bigger domain, there are certain studies which are catching up, but there is still time left in the country that we work on the virtual water trade. We have studied some time ago the intra country virtual water trade also, that the food grains were shifted from Haryana, Punjab and going to Bihar and the southern part or the central part, or certain other water intensive goods were being transported other way. So the states which were actually not in the words of virtual water trade, they were demanding compensation for the food which they were transferring. I mean, they have never spoken of the water which was getting transported actually at that particular. There is still a lot of time left, I think, so we need to work on that.
Yes, I think so. And I will come to Professor Joita on this, because Netherlands, has been, especially when we talk of Hickstra and we talk of water footprint, and how important you think it is that businesses, or even for that matter, we start focusing on water footprint.
Absolutely. And for the Netherlands, we are pretty good at managing our water in the Netherlands, but actually we live off the world's water, because all the products that need water are coming from other parts of the world. And that's also one of the reasons why I mentioned this business about perhaps moving from meat production to vegetarian diets more, because that needs much less water, but also the story about moving perhaps from rice to wheat. And I'm a rice eater, of course, from Bengal, and I can imagine that it's a culturally no, but rice is problematic because of the methane emissions. It's problematic also because of the large water. So there is that food diet storyline. But I think the problem with the virtual water narrative is you cannot draw a direct policy implication. You can't say that people in North China should move to, the farmers should move to where the water is, and you can't say that people living in Shanghai should move to the north of China because they're doing business. You can't do those kinds of things. But the message is clear, and the message is we have to be very careful of how much water we import in every cup of coffee that we drink or every cup of tea. And so that's, but I would, for my part of the story, I would focus on the meat storyline, and that could work really quite well in India, because we have a lot of vegetarian cooking. We have vegetarian cuisines, we have vegetarian people. So it might fit better in an Indian context than elsewhere. The rice and wheat one would be more difficult.
Yeah, I agree with you. But food miles is something that, is now in discussion, that from where does your food come? So where does your water come? But then from where does your food come also becomes very important. That's there.
But if I can also add on the energy side,
Yes.
nuclear energy uses a lot of water, coal uses a lot of water,
Right.
gas and oil use water, but solar and wind use less water. So, from an energy perspective, also we can start looking at
yes, what really we need to, but also I think we need to, as we discussed that we need to look at the entire value chain and not just the actual process that's happening within the four walls, but probably the value chain also becomes very critical for businesses to look at. Ranjan, I would like to come to you. A lot of people have been talking about concepts like Sponge City and that's in India also. I think Chennai also probably is trying on Sponge City. What is your thought on that? Should India really go for concepts like Sponge City, or we have had a good tradition of water management within the country, or somewhere there we can find a middle path?
Well, Sponge City in totality, I don't know about that, but certainly the rejuvenation of our lakes, rejuvenation of the hydrological channels which have been blocked. So because of the debris and those kinds of things that we have put on those, restoration work on those so that we have this blue-green infrastructure whenever there is going to be an extreme event. That is definitely that we have to take into consideration. As yet, our stormwater design manual, the manual that all engineers refer to, they don't talk about these infrastructure in details. It is still about, the design of the pipeline, whether it should be concrete, steel, PVC, not really about how these kind of channels and these kind of rainwater ponds, as they say, those can be taken as part of the infrastructure. So whether we call it Sponge City, whether we call it blue-green infrastructure, we definitely have to look at it. That goes without saying.
Yeah, Ranjana. In fact, we had an opportunity, Ranjana, me and another colleague of mine, Dr. Shirley, to work with Gurgaon Metropolitan Development Authority on a small area on the Gulf Coast Road, especially on the blue-green concept. So you can check out the report on that on our website. I think there is one question that has come. I would like to know about the river connection scheme from the experts. What interlinking of rivers quickly? I think we have overshot time. So one quick response that I want, maybe Ranjana, would you like to talk about a little on the interlinking of rivers? And you think that it's a good idea to do that, to take water from surplus to deficit region?
No, it's not a good idea at all. I mean, let's not take water from Brahmaputra and take it to peninsular India. Not a good idea at all. But having said that, there are a few river basins which are already connected, like the Ravi Bias link, the Satluj Yamuna link. Those links are there. So a small connect somewhere. Yes, but large river linking, absolutely not. It's not like a two-way street where we go for traffic. So traffic can be managed that way, not water. So as a water professional, absolutely
thanks,
no.
Ranjana. A quick comment, Mr. Marwa. What do you think? Good idea.
It's from my point of view, it's a delicate balance need to be maintained. We need to transfer some of the water, which is wherever it is excess available, but we need to manage where we are taking it. Look, the waterlogged areas of Haryana and Punjab have been, the water has been put into these areas from outside the area. So they actually became waterlogged, which because of the growing of the paddy, which we are talking about right now. Earlier, we used to grow the cotton there. So, I mean, these problems will come, surely. But we need to be the management needs to be following all the footsteps.
Yeah, Mr. Marwa, I think there is one more question that I would like to, since you're connected to the water, of course, Central Groundwater, but now being member Haryana Water Authority, do the Ministry of Water talk to the Ministry of Agriculture? So that's one question that has come, very interesting, from Sunil. He's again a climate reality leader. So why is Indian agriculture so water inefficient? Why don't we do proper crop planning and we grow sugarcane in Karnataka? Why is power supply free for agriculture? Where is the incentive for water conservation? All very difficult questions.
Yeah, all difficult. I like to sum up in, I told in my lecture also that it goes with the state actually. The center has a role to play. Like Professor Gupta has said that there are certain issues because of the Easement Act. The control of water for the regulatory, which is the next question. I think I'll answer that also. The Haryana government or the central government is already regulating the industrial water, the water which is used in the industry, the water which is used in the domestic industry actually, the big projects, big infrastructure projects, that is being regulated. Some of the aquifers which were getting overexploited or which were water stressed, they were earlier up to certain depth. I mean, somebody rose a question that Ranjana probably said that up to which depth the aquifers are occurring. So we had defined in, say, for example, in Karnar area, probably around 10 years ago, that around 100 meter till 100 meter you can draw water, but don't go below that. So there was a restriction, there was a regulation for agriculture I'm talking about. But as of now, it's not there.
Thank you. Professor Joyita, would you like to comment on this?
I think that I'm not entirely sure who's talking to whom in India, but I think it's really important that India's development is made with an idea of how much water there is. So the planning of what we want to do in terms of energy, infrastructure, services, agriculture, teaching, education, water, everything needs water. So how do we manage within a water budget to plan our development story? That's really, really important. And how much of this water is going to go for the products we want to export? So that's those are the
rightly said. I think along with the next finance budget, we should also present a water budget of India. Thank you so much. It was so interesting to listen to everyone. Professor Prateek, yes.
So I, thank you, Fawzia. Before you thank everybody, I just, there's a lot of in literature one finds, and not even literature, in newspaper one talks about carbon credits. We don't see so much water footprint actually coming in the open discussion. You find water footprints in literature that is basically academic literature, but it has not actually come in the consciousness of the ordinary people, that you actually find the manner in which we talk about carbon footprints, carbon credits in the newspapers and other things, which is how now even the school going kid actually talks about these things. But unless and until you spoke about virtual water, I mean, I'm basically just putting this to the panel, unless and until we quantify this in terms of how much water footprint a particular commodity will have, or a particular whether it is rice, whether it is meat, whether it is pen or paper or coffee, whatever. So then only we will be able to actually know how much we are actually consuming, and that will, I think, unless until that comes in the consciousness of the ordinary people, masses, in fact, I would say, it will remain invisible only.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Prateek, for that last comment. And now I would like to invite Bhavesh, who is the program lead at the Climate Reality Project India, to deliver
can I answer a last question, which is
probably
directed on me?
Yes, please.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting. I'm delaying the things. I'm virtually once again sorry for that. I'll just say that it is possible. Do natural farming. Avoid usage of water for, over usage of water for growing crops. It's possible. That's all.
But if India uses drip irrigation, there'll be less rainfall in Africa.
Okay, let's. Considering geopolitical scenario, let's talk about first thing first. Okay. And
so I think, I think that's amazing. Absolutely, but I think it's also important that we see, like for instance, we have programs like Catch the Rain. There is an MIS system which is there where people are supposed to upload data. in terms of how many wells were dug or how many ponds were rejuvenated. But honestly speaking, we really need to do a good baseline study to understand that where the water stood and how much we have been able to really recharge. The Central Groundwater Board, yes, it comes out with data, there is no doubt about it, but are those number of wells sufficient, or we need to really have more points in terms of measuring? Does this static infrastructure help us, or do we really need a dynamic system, a sensor-based system that is there to actually see where the groundwater, because now we have sensor-based groundwater monitoring systems which are there, where you can actually look at real-time data in terms of groundwater moving up and down. Are we really prepared to give water the same level of probably prominence the way we give it to our air quality? So our air quality gets displayed everywhere. When do we really start displaying our groundwater? We have a digital board which says that, okay, your groundwater is at this level. The problem is about behavioral change, and Anthropocene that probably Professor Joyita spoke about. IPCC report has very clearly brought out, that the climate change is probably driven by human beings, and we need to change ourselves and we need to change our way of life. I think I have to say thank you. This topic is getting hotter and hotter, and I have been very lucky. My mother just knocked and gave me a cup of tea. I don't think any of you are as fortunate. So over to Bhavish, and Bhavish for the vote of thanks, and thank you for joining hands for this. Please.
Thank you, Fawzia. Water is elixir of life. It's not a statement. It's not an item. It's a reality. Imagine a day without water and we get the reality of life. This is what clean water, and you rightly said, clean air can have the importance in our life. Professor Prateek, your work and words inspire equally. Terry Sass has been our partner for a range of water and other sustainability related issues. And please allow me to admit, the students are a class apart. How and why? Made possible with professors like Dr. Ranjana and Dr. Fawzia, and many others who are bridging this gap of academia and on-ground realities. Aditya sir, the work done by you, your partners, show that probably it's not rocket science, but more of a collective effort and zeal that can bring an entire village, taluka, together on water positivity. 3 lakh worth of monthly bill just for water and coming down to zero. This is resonating with us all. More such recharges to you and Team Climate Reality. Dr. Mawaha, your works and insights from the field are again ringing bell among us all, the audience out here. Situation is really scary. The crop's water usage, aquifer withdrawals, and unfortunate silence all across need more discussion for sure, and at all levels. Our audience would remain in touch with you for sure. Dr. Joyita, your works and the association you show with India's groundwater really makes a connect with us all. Yes, again, silence needs to be broken on contracts, mining, procedures, the true cost of water, as Dr. Fawzia put across, which obviously need a rethink as stakeholders are varied and multinationals too nowadays. Dr. Ranjana, it's work of people like you that complete the spectrum. Research on urban, arid, seaside water management makes up for interesting insights for students. Keep inspiring us all to dive deep on the subject to make up for good researchers. We need more of them. Dr. Fawzia, since we are discussing water, you are the best catalyst present out here, bringing all the different elements together. You made this webinar possible. Not only your academia, but voluntary efforts at the ground are an inspiration. I have been with you on the field, and let me share, friends, she makes it a breeze to learn on water management for every kind of audience. Last but not the least, all the attendees, your very presence show your commitment for the cause. School students, early career professionals joining from all across India, South Asia, Africa, and other parts of the world, you show us a ray of hope. To begin with, let's try to do our bit and see how as an individual, we can make water cautious. We can be water cautious with respect to our usage pattern, and then take these baby steps forward in times to come. Recording is available on Climate Realities India YouTube page for you to see it again. and further sharing with your connections. We'll send you some more information over email as well. Thanks for joining in and looking forward to see you again for a webinar in times to come. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Bhavesh. Thank you. Thank you for joining hands. When I had started contemplating, probably, there was a telepathy when I started contemplating on this, along with my colleagues. Bhavesh, I see a message from Bhavesh. Fawzia, what are you doing for World Water Day? Huh? And that's how we thought that let's synergize. I think enough of working in silos, and we came together in just about a week's time. You set it all up from the design of the creative to the links to really helping out in terms of sending invites and everything else. And of course, we have a long association otherwise as well. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and let's together work towards protecting such a precious resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.